Hey everyone, Jennifer Lee Chan here from NBC Sports Bay Area. How's everybody doing? I have been throwing some videos up there and I've got more to put up this weekend. So it is Saturday night before the Super Bowl. I know I haven't been on here, but I've been giving you some videos anyways. I was in Orlando, obviously, for the Pro Bowl, and then was home for a day, and then went out to New Orleans for NFL honors. Did Radio Row for a little bit. So talked to Chris Sims, who a lot of you have watched in the videos, and Steve Smith and Dan Orlovsky. So I did talk to some other guys. I talked to Rich Eisen and Steve Mariucci on the red carpet and asked them about Brock Purdy as well. So I'll post those videos tomorrow. But for now, let's talk about what the other guys said. So let's talk about Dan Orlovsky. And I think the consensus is of Brock Purdy and his, I mean, I use the word struggles, but obviously it's all in comparison to his second year. The 2023 season, Brock Purdy was on fire. So I'm not saying Brock Purdy had an awful year. He just had a down year compared to the Super Bowl run. 49ers finished 6 and 11, but the consensus is among all of these guys that I've been talking to is that he dealt with a lot of injuries. I mean, a lot of his key players were injured. There was not one game during the 2024 season where he had every single one of his stars out there. So there was never one game where it was Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle. Not one, which is crazy because, those are the pillars of the offense. So I think that there is some thought that, yes, I think there's a consensus that it was a tough year for him because he didn't have his guys. And as a young quarterback, as Brock Purdy is, you need your supporting cast to be consistent. That consistency, and Peyton Manning said it, and I have that video down there as well. Consistency for a young quarterback is very important. Having the same guys around you, having the same offensive line. And to be honest, the 49ers have been pretty lucky with the offensive line being consistent. Now, they haven't been fantastic. I think they need to do some work on the offensive line, but they've been consistent, which does help Brock Purdy know his guys, know what they're going to do, know where they're going to be. So there is that. But what Dan Orlovsky saw that was a little bit less is the anticipation. Without having that consistency, it's a little less trust in the guys that were going to be there. So Juwan Jennings obviously had an almost thousand yard season. George Kittle had a great season. Those are the two guys that were on the field consistently for him. The rest of the guys, the rest of the receivers, Deebo Samuel was there too as well. But really, it was George Kittle and Juwan Jennings that were the stars of the offense this year. There was not a third receiver that really stood out. I mean, in 2023, it was Brandon Ayuk, it was Christian McCaffrey, and it was George Kittle. They all had incredible seasons. Deebo Samuel was up there again as well. But to not have that other option for Brock Purdy and have that consistency. I mean, you had Ricky Pearsall that came in after sitting out for several weeks. You lost Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk's first 6 games, 7 games were after he held out for quite a long time. So he didn't have those reps in practice either. So the lack of consistency for Brock Purdy is what led to the struggles, is what a lot of people are thinking. And I know some of you don't like Dan Orlovsky or Chris Sims and their opinions, but they do have a lot of experience in watching the games. And yes, maybe they weren't top quarterbacks. They're not Hall of Famers, but they do have an eye on the game. Chris Sims, don't forget, is a very close friend of Kyle Shanahan. So while they aren't discussing what's going to happen with Brock Purdy and the contract, they do have a knowledge of the behaviors and what they think is important. So Chris Sims, I trust as far as kind of knowing what Kyle's ticks are, what Kyle's preferences are. So, I understand that, sometimes it's you don't agree with someone's opinion, and so you think they're trash. Well, these guys have been in the industry well longer than I have, so I do ask them a lot of questions, and I get opinions from a lot of people to try and see what their take is. And obviously, they're outside of the building. I do talk to people that are inside the building as well, and I do value their opinions maybe a little bit more sometimes because they are in the building talking to John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan all the time. So, it's interesting. So I do it because it's interesting and I like hearing what they have to say. Sometimes an outside perspective gives you a different look than what you know from talking to guys every day. And while I trust all of the players that I talk to and what they're saying, sometimes when you're in a situation, you don't see what you can see from the outside. So I think it's important to get a lot of different opinions. So Dan Orlovsky said the anticipation was less evident. Not that it was not there, but it was less evident. He does think Brock Purdy should get a mega contract. What that is, no one knows yet because, Dak Prescott set the bar so high with the $60 million a year contract. That's not necessarily market value. And I don't know that Brock Purdy would get what Dak Prescott has gotten percentage of the cap wise. Now, I mean, I've been saying this for a long time. I've talked to the guys at Spot Track, and they're telling me that an average quarterback salary, and this is like, not Josh Allen, not Patrick Mahomes, not Lamar Jackson, but guys that are in that next tier, which is where Brock is. Brock is not in the bottom tier. He's not in maybe the top five, but he is at the top. I mean, like he was one of the best quarterbacks statistically in 2023. A little bit of drop off in 2024 because he didn't have his guys out there. So when you look at what that contract would be, 20 to 22% of the entire salary cap, which is $272 million, is about $60 million. So they're expecting, you know, that's what they're expecting. They think that the average quarterback salary, that top of the free agent next tier of quarterbacks that are signed are going to be in that high 50s, $60 million a year range. Dan Orlovsky says, yes, you do. You pay him. Whatever it is, you do. Um, but it is one of those weird things. One of the things that I think Brock Purdy does have going for him is that he's not a guy that gets the contract and is going to stop working. He is a grinder. He's played with a chip on his shoulder since he started playing football. The story that he told me about how he had mono when he was in high school and he didn't want to sit out a game. He does not like sitting out of a game. He wants to get better, and it is a mindset that he has, which makes him attractive to the 49ers, to Kyle Shanahan. The fact that he is a film junkie and really doesn't want to make the same mistake twice, I think is very important for a quarterback. All right. Chris Sims, he felt he saw some regression from Brock Purdy. And it's kind of what Dan Orlovsky was saying. Without the guys out there, it wasn't consistently good play. And he said it wasn't just Brock, it was the entire team. And a lot of those, a lot of the injuries. So it was inconsistent play from everybody. I mean, there was the game where Debo dropped passes. There were games where Juwan dropped passes. So, I mean, there's been inconsistent performances. There are games where the offensive line played really well. There are games where they didn't play as well. So, Chris Sims, though, doesn't believe that they should pay these mega contracts. And I think it's less about Brock Purdy as a person, but more about the NFL being in the way it is and the fact that these players are getting these mega contracts before they're playing. It's an advance, like Peyton Manning says, on your future performance. I think the important part of that is to find the right person who will continue to grow and continue to play better. The NFL is kind of a funky thing just because it is, the salaries are not guaranteed. So I understand why players want to get as much money as they can, as fast as they can, because their careers are very short and the money is not guaranteed. Which is why George Kittle is going to be looking for a new contract because he doesn't have any guaranteed money on his following year in 2025. So Chris Sims, what he believes is that the 49ers do need to take care of the offensive line during free agency or during the draft. He also thinks that a key to the 49ers' success in 2025 is a quiet offseason. In 2024, it was Brandon Ayuk holding out. It was Christian McCaffrey wanting a new deal. It was Trent Williams holding out until week one. So having all those three main players not there for all the reps during OTAs, all the reps during training camp, makes a huge difference on a young quarterback. So they need to get everybody in. And part of that starts with Brock Purdy being there right at OTAs. So we'll see what happens there. Last video I posted recently was Steve Smith. Not many of you watch that. It's a short video. Check it out. Steve Smith talking about what he really likes about Ricky Pearsall. He loves how he's developing his game and really does think that Ricky Pearsall is going to take a huge leap in his second year. Hopefully, no off-season injuries. That you remember he had the shoulder injury and the hamstring injury, and then of course he was shot on Labor Day weekend. So he thinks that without all of that off the field issue, those off the field issues with Ricky Pearsall, that he will have a much better season. He thinks he's built for it. He thinks he's, got the right mindset, and he is also a grinder. So good words from Steve Smith, and he thinks that they need to address the O line during the offseason, free agency, the draft, whatnot. I think the focus of most of the people I've talked to have said, hey, they've got to shore up the offensive line. Defense with Robert Saleh coming back is going to kind of not necessarily fix itself, but I think it's going to get better. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to be posting more videos of the guys I've talked to. Eric Armstead, overjoyed that he won the Walter Payton Man of the Year. I have been covering him since he was drafted by the 49ers, and he does such great work, amazing work, working in the community of Sacramento, throughout Northern California, and now in Jacksonville. He makes sure that kids have an opportunity to learn, just no matter what their socioeconomic status is. So, underprivileged schools, he will buy computers, he will bring them lunches. He does so much work behind the scenes to help make education an equal opportunity for everyone. Also, really happy for George Kittle winning the Salute to Service Award. I mentioned that earlier in another video. It was fun to see everybody all dressed up. It was fun to see Kyle Juszczyk present George Kittle his award, all of it, NFL honors. The only crazy thing about that, if you watch on Instagram, it was the tightest, closest quarters. It was sweaty. It was hot. It was in a tent. There was no circulation. Players, stars, people were going by and they were literally dripping sweat. And we were not doing any better behind the railing. So a fun night, but a crazy one. And I'll give you more Super Bowl and Pro Bowl stories later. All right, everybody. Hope you're doing well. It's another late night upload for me. Hope you guys are well, and happy Super Bowl Sunday. I know it's not the teams you want, but are we Eagles? I don't know. I don't even know. Both of them need to lose. All right, bye.